So first we took care of stabilizing the trunk. Then we took care of mobilizing the hips and the thoracic spine. Now we're going to go back to stability. We're going to stabilize the joints below and above the ones we were just working on in Thread the Frog. So the joint below the hip is the knee. The joint above the thoracic spine is the shoulder girdle. So the shoulder girdle is the scapula, the shoulder blade, the clavicle, the collarbone, and the manubrium of the sternum. That, is it manubrium? Yeah, that's the manubrium. That is the only connection of our arms to our axial skeleton, is this joint right here. The rest of this joint segment is floating, and that's why it's important to create stability in the shoulder girdle, because it's not a skeletal joint. Our knee is stable because bones come together in a certain way that make it only do this, and make it a really strong hinge because of this knee, a really strong hinge joint because of this patella. So our knee is stable by nature. Our shoulder girdle, if we only have this little joint right here between the collarbone and the manubrium of the sternum, holding our whole arm to our axial skeleton, we're putting a lot of pressure on these muscles around the shoulder blades and collarbone to help stabilize that joint, because we do a lot with our arms. We can get that stability from those muscles though. There are many layers of muscles in the upper back. There are muscles to perform any kind of function you can imagine, any kind of action you can imagine in the shoulder girdle. There's a muscle for it. So it's really designed to be stable. When we talk about stability in the shoulder girdle, we're talking not about keeping the joint in one place necessarily. We're talking about the joint segment being in its most stable position relative to the position of the shoulder joint. So this may require some clarification. We've got the shoulder girdle, which is the manubrium of the sternum, the clavicle, and the shoulder blade. And then we've got the shoulder joint, where the head of the humerus, our upper arm bone, is connected in the subacromial space, which is basically where the shoulder blade and collarbone come together. It's called the acromion process. There's a little gap there where the head of the humerus is, and a little acetabulum on the shoulder blade a little bit further down. But it's not like the ball and socket joint of the hip, where the acetabulum surrounds a majority of that hip bone, the head of the femur. The shoulder joint, it's a lot shallower. It's a lot easier to dislocate. But we also require more movement out of the shoulder joint than we do out of the hip joint. So we don't need as much range of motion here, so the body can create a deeper acetabulum as opposed to the shallower one that's in the shoulder joint. So shoulder girdle, manubrium, collarbone, scapula, shoulder joint, the head of the humerus, and the subacromial space, and in the acetabulum of the shoulder blade, scapula. Wherever the humerus goes, the muscles of the shoulder girdle should follow. So there's a thing called scapulohumeral rhythm, where the shoulder blade moves along with the humerus. If I'm raising my arm out to the side, once my humerus gets to parallel with the floor and above, my shoulder blade is going to start to elevate with it. If I'm doing a push-up, once my elbow gets past the midline of my rib cage, as I press, as the humerus goes forward, the shoulder blade is going to come forward a little bit. As I pull back, My elbow's going to come back, my shoulder blade's going to come back into a retracted and depressed position. The muscles of the upper back are kind of fighting a losing battle with our daily posture. We want the shoulder girdle to move down and back when our arms are close into our body, and they just don't do that. They hang around here all day. We're just stressed out. I'm so worried. We're going to deliberately focus on depressing the shoulder blade, pulling it down away from the ear, creating some length in the neck when we're focusing on our pulling exercises or even our pushing exercises, because we're most of us out of balance. Our upper traps are really tight and good at doing this. Our lower traps and rhomboids are bad at doing this. So we have to kind of counter that. So now we know about the shoulder girdle versus the shoulder joint. We're going to create some stability in the shoulder girdle along with some stability in the knee with this next exercise, which is called the kickstand row. I'm going to start by standing right over the top of the bell. I'm going to move my toe just slightly back so that the toe of the back foot is in line with the heel of the front foot. I'm going to make sure that when I do step back, my width doesn't change. So I'm not going here or here. I'm just going straight backward. Once I'm there, I'm going to hinge the hips back. I'm going to push the knee out a little bit, just like our kickstand deadlift. And then while in this bottom position, I'm going to draw the elbow back. As I draw the elbow back, I'm thinking about initiating that squeeze with the shoulder blade moving down and back, so that I'm not here shrugging up and getting those upper traps even tighter. I've got enough space between my knees because as I hinge down, I'm pushing them out. I've got enough space to row without ramming the kettlebell into the inside of my knee. I've got my weight shifted so that it's all over this front leg, just like the kickstand deadlift. As you're performing this, we're not really thinking about single leg balance, but you're going to get some single leg balance training in here as well, especially if you make sure that you're not shifted over to this back leg, that all of your weight is shifted over this front leg. That's the knee and shoulder girdle stability portion of the joint by joint warm up with the kickstand row. We've got one more exercise.